Good morning, everyone. This third round of public hearings is being held as part of the national inquiry being conducted by the Commission on the impact of climate change on the human rights of Filipino people. This proceeding stems from a petition filed before the Commission docketed as CHR case number CHR-NI-2016-0001. The solemnity of the public hearing shall be upheld at all times. Respect should be accorded to everyone present. The clapping of hands and unnecessary remarks shall not be allowed and may be regarded as direct contempt of the inquiry panel. Cell phones should be turned off or put on silent mode while proceedings are going on. All rise. The commissioners present for today's inquiry proceedings are Honorable Commissioner Lea C. Tanodra Armamento, Honorable Commissioner Gwendolyn L. Pimentel Gana, Inquiry Panel Chairman of the NICC, Honorable Commissioner Roberto Eugenio T. Catis, Honorable Chair of the Commission on Human Rights, Honorable Jose Luis Martin C. Gascon. Please remain standing for the national anthem and the ecumenical prayer.
Bayang magiliw, pelas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, dulan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong babaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa pagnayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Dakilang may likha sa kalingat pang-unawa, mangyari ang iyong diwa sa langit at sa lupa. Bigyan mo ng sapat ang lahat sa araw-araw, turo ang magparaya, gaya ng iyong gawa. Iadyan niyo kami sa pagmamataas upang maiwaksi ang bukit at dahan. At sa pangumikha ng pamayanan payapa sa kalikasan kabuhayan, kapanyahan, paniniwala. Siya nawa, siya nawa, siya nawa, siya nawa.
Everyone may now be seated.
Panel. As in the last round of hearings, we have invited Father Pedro Walpole to assist the panel in the conduct of the inquiry. May we now request Father Walpole to take his seat in the place reserved for him. Counsels, you may now enter your appearances.
Good morning, Your Honors. Griselda Mayo Anda, representing the petitioners. We are ready.
Pleasant morning, Your Honors. Hasmina D. Paudak, representing the petitioners, and we are ready, Your Honors.
Before we begin hearing your witnesses, may we know if there are any other counsels present in this room who might want their presence today be put on the record, even as just observers? If there are none, counsel, you may now proceed to present your first witness.
Your Honors, before we proceed in presenting our witnesses and resource persons, may we make some manifestations, Your Honors?
Please go ahead.
Your Honors, we would like to manifest that we have received 4 resolutions from different local government units supporting the petition and the conduct of this national inquiry. We have received resolutions from the municipality of Palo Leyte, dated July 10, 2018, City of Tacloban, dated July 18, 2018, City of Marawi, dated July 25, 2018, and Municipality of Capalonga, Camarines Norte, dated August 23, 2018, Your Honor. Also, Your Honor, we would like to manifest that we had a pre-marking of exhibit last August 22, 2018, and we marked exhibits LLLL, that's 4L, up to GGGGGG, that's 6G, Your Honors. We will be having additional marking of HHHHHH, that's 6H, later on, Your Honor. And also, we would like to manifest, Your Honors, that the marked exhibits already bear the original signatures of all the witnesses and resource persons. So, Your Honors, your copies are actually still e-signatures, but the marked exhibits are already original signatures, Your Honors. We would also like to manifest that the transcription and Filipino to English translation of testimonies of select petitioner witnesses, namely Mr. Pablo Rosales, Mr. Jonathan De Los Reyes, Mr. Izagani Molina, and Mr. RJ De Ramos, and Mr. Manuel Abinales, Mr. Pablo Taon III, and Ms. Francia M. Encinas, all community witnesses during the May 23 to 24 public hearings, will be submitted next week, Your Honor, through an ex parte manifestation and submission. And finally, Your Honors, we will be presenting 5 community witnesses from Tacloban City, Camarines Norte, and Ifugao today and tomorrow. May we be allowed to ask questions in the vernacular, the language the witnesses are more comfortable with, and for the questions and answers to be recorded verbatim in such language. We commit to submit the transcript and translation from Filipino to English for these community witnesses before the next public hearing. That will be all, Your Honor, for our manifestations.
Just a clarification, Counsel. The 4 resolutions that you earlier adverted to, have they been already marked?
Not yet, Your Honor.
Would you like to have them marked already?
We will be submitting, Your Honor, to a manifestation, Your Honor, and then we will be asking for a mark.
There's just an oral manifestation
Yes,
today,
Your
and
Honor.
the formal submission will be made
Right after the public hearings, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And how about the additional documents that you wanted marked? The 6 H's document HHHHHH.
We already gave it to Attorney Martin, Your Honor.
Okay, so your manifestation is noted. and your requests are allowed. You may now present your first.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, for our first witness, may we call on Arthur S. Gollum?
Morning, Mr. Witness. May we have the witness sworn in? Excuse me, Counsel, can you turn on the mic? All right.
Arthur Golong from Tacloban City. Uh, I am a Filipino.
Counsel, you may proceed. Please sit down, witness.
Your Honor, Arthur S. Gollum is a Super Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda survivor. She is a transgender community leader in Tacloban City. Your Honor, we are presenting the testimony of Arthur Gollum to share her experience as a transgender community leader before, during, and after the disastrous Super Typhoon Haiyan that struck Tacloban in November 2013, and how the climate-related event compounded gender-based discrimination and how it changed the life of a survivor. Your Honor, before we proceed, may we request Mr. Gollum to identify a statement that he prepared and submitted before this honorable commission.
Please go ahead, Mr. Witness or Madam Witness.
Magandang umaga, Arthur.
Magandang umaga din po.
Arthur, naalala mo ba kung meron kang isinumiting dokumento dito sa Commission of Human Rights?
Opo.
Kung ito ipapakita ko sa iyo, ito ba yung makikilala?
Opo.
Meron ako ditong isang salaysay ni Arthur S. Gollum. 5 pahina. Maaari mo bang suriin?
Opo, ito po yung sa akin.
Sa ika-5 pahina ng salaysay nito, merong lagdas taas na pangalang Arthur S. Gollum at may petsang August 14, 2018. Maaari mo bang sabihin kung kanino?
Ito.
Maraming salamat. Your Honor, for the record, this salaysay ni Arthur S. Gollum was pre-marked as Exhibit LLLL, that's 4 L's, to LLLL-4, and the signature of Arthur S. Gollum was marked as LLLL-4-A, Your Honor. May we ask for the confirmation from Attorney Martin the Clerk? Attorney Martin confirmed the pre-marking of exhibit. Arthur, maaari ka nang mag-umpisa.
Okay, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Sa totoo lang, ngayon lang ako nakaharap ng ganito. So, kinakabahan talaga ako. At saka sa ating mga, Your Honors, good morning po sa inyong lahat.
Good morning.
At sa lahat ng mga nandito. Ako po si Arthur Golong. Isa po akong community leader o president doon sa area namin, doon sa Tacloban. At ako po ay nagmamay-ari ng isang maliit na salon doon sa bahay namin. Dati po actually ang Arthur is nakalimutan ko na yan. Kilala ako bilang sa pangalan si Jean. Si Jean is, yun yung nakasanayan. But suddenly, nung nagyulanda, kailangan kasi ang tunay na pangalan doon sa lista. Kasi ako ang tumayong head of family doon sa amin, doon sa nanay ko at saka sa tatay ko, gawa ng matatanda na nga po sila. Galing sa Sabar ako. Lumipat kami ng Tacloban nung ako ay 9 years old. Nung yung 14 years old ako, nakipagsapalaran ako dito sa Maynila. namasukan ako bilang katulong hanggang sa pumasok ako bilang isang beautician. Medyo matagal-tagal din ako dito sa Tacloban, umabot din ako, I think mga 17 or 18 years dito sa Tacloban. Ay, dito sa Maynila, dito sa Maynila. Noong 2004, nag-decide na akong umuwi sa Tacloban. Kasi doon sa dito sa Maynila kasi, ang isang beses, yung sa isang beses kong kakainin, kung doon sa Tacloban, bali sa aming tatlo, halos 2 beses na namin kakainin yun. So parang gusto ko doon talaga, doon na ako mag-work sa amin. Namasukan ako mula 2004 hanggang 2010 para makaipon ako ng aking, nag-ipon ako na makabili ako ng gamit sa parlor, na para kasi gusto ko makapagsarili, makapagtayo ng maliit man lang, kahit maliit na isang salamin at saka isang suklay sa bahay namin. Kahit paano naman, nakabili ako at saka nakapag-home service na ako. Nang dahil doon, yun parang, yung kinita ko noon, naipon ko, more or less siguro, hindi naman sa pagmamayabang, nakaipon ako kahit konti ng almost mga 50,000. Na yun, kung ano, yun yung pinangpundar ko sa pinapangarap ko sa tanang buhay ko. Kasi kung pa nagsimula kasi kami sa wala, as in wala hanggang ngayon wala pa rin naman. Pero, naipamili ko yun ng gamit ko kung saan na-enjoy ko siya for almost 1 month. Yung mga gamit na pinamili ko. Yun na, ang nangyari na, nung November 5, ito na, may mga na malakas na talaga ang ugong balita na yun nga, malakas daw itong parating na bagyo. So, ang ginawa ko, ligpit dito, ligpit doon, kumbaga, yung mga dapat maitabi, kailangan na naming itabi, kailangan na naming ayusin. November 6, nag-decide ako, sila nanay, ilipat na, that was Wednesday, ilipat na doon sa evacuation center, doon sa eskwelahan. Kasi yun nga, safe sila doon, oo. So, nung November 7, si tatay bumalik sa bahay. Sabi ni tatay, huwag ka dito. Ako naman kasi hindi ko maiwan. Diyos ko, sa tagal-tagal ko na pangarap na magkaroon ng refrigerator. Kasi baka nakawin kung sakasakali iwan ko. Tapos, napilitan si tatay nung mga November 8 na 4 a.m. Sabi ko, nagluto na ako para dadalhin doon sa evacuation center doon sa aking matatanda. Sabi naman ni tatay, sige, pupunta na tayo doon. Dadala lang ako ng 2 damit. Kasi baka mabasa itong mga damit natin dito. Yung ref nga namin nakakatawa, inilagay namin sa sofa. Kasi sabi ko, tatay, ilagay natin yung ref at saka yung washing machine. Kasi syempre, wala pang 1 buwan na gagamit. Mula nung nabili ko, pangarap ko yung simula nung maliit ako. Kasi sabi ko, baka hanggang tuhod ang tubig. Kaya natin itaas. So doon, nung pumunta na kami ng evacuation, talagang nagpumilit ako bumalik. Pumilit ako umuwi sa bahay. Sila nanay, iniman ko na doon sa eskwelahan. Nung nasa bahay na ako, mga 6 o'clock, doon ko na nakita yung, sa mga pelikula nyo lang makikita, unti-unti lang nilalabon ang bahay. Hanggang sa nawala, tapos mga nabuwal na ang puno. Nung time na yun, nag-decide na ako na pupunta ng school. Ang problema, nabuwal na yung mga pader doon na natumba na yung mga pader. So, hindi na kami makadaan. Mabuti na lang nung may isang saging, may puno ng saging na yun ang nakapitan namin. Pero doon sa amin, hindi namin na-feel ang alon kasi sabi nila malaking alon daw, pero kami hindi namin nakita yon. Ang nakita na lang namin parang baha.
So nakakapit kami dun sa saging kung saan kami nagpaikot-ikot. Hindi namin, sabi ko lang sa kanila, huwag kayong papadyak. Hindi tayo lalangoy, magpapaanod lang tayo. Tapos nung time na yun, sa totoo lang, ako hawak-hawak ko yung cellphone ko sa kabilang kamay. Tapos may hawak ako na maliit na plywood. Maliit lang, tatakpan ko ang mukha ko kahit anong mangyari. Kailangan ang mukha ko makover ko. Kasi ba, hindi tayo ganun kaganda eh. Eh kung mamamatay pa tayo ng hindi maganda, hindi na maganda talaga. So yun yung parang protection ko lang sa mukha ko lang. Hindi namin alam kung ilang segundo, ilang minuto, ilang oras kami nagpaikot-ikot. Kasi parang umikot lang kami. Nung bandang, aywan ko kung malayo na kami kasi ang akala namin nasa Pacific Ocean kami at that time. Kasi wala kang makikita, hindi mo alam kung ano mga objects na maaano sa'yo eh. Kasi madilim, kahit nga yung nasa dulo na ng saging doon sa kinakapitan namin, hindi ko na makita. So ganun talaga kadilim. At saka ang ulan, parang karayom talaga nababaon sa balat mo sa lakas ng hangin. So ganun ang ewan ko sa lahat ng na hindi talaga namin ma-express. Nung time na yun, may nakapa kami. Sabi ko, ay, mababa na ang tubig kasi may nakapa kami mga dahon-dahon. Pero nung lumingon ako, sabi ko, ba't parang may poste ng liyeko? Talagang tiningnan ko yung poste ng liyeko, hindi naman siya nakahiga. Nakatayo naman, halos maabot yung transformer ng tubig. Sabi ko, so ibig sabihin, yun pala yung nakakapa namin is dahon ng talisay. Kung familiar kayo sa talisay, mataas na kahoy yun. So yun pala yung inaapakan namin. At saka nung saan kami nag-end up doon sa pakiano namin hanggang sa medyo bumaba na, humuhupa na ang tubig. Doon kami sa clubhouse ng Beta View Homes, yung isang exclusive subdivision kung saan doon kami sa likod nakatira. Kasi as informal settlers, doon kami nakatira sa likod nila. Nung makita ko, akala ko kami lang ang tao. Nung humupa at medyo nagliwanag, doon ko nakita na ang dami palang tao na halos gumagapang sila kasi malakas pang hangin. Papunta doon sa lugar kung saan kami naandun. Yung mga kahoy na nakatayo, yung nyug na nakatayo, yung posting nakatayo, makikita mo may mga tao din. Pero sa awa ng Diyos, mga buhay sila na talagang yumayakap doon sa mga lugar kung saan na tamaan nung yung malakas na tubig. Yun yung hanggang sa nag-decide kami. Nakita ko na yung pumunta kami doon sa evacuation, nakita ko yung nanay ko, tsaka tatay ko, at saka yung pamangkin ko na 7 months na siya, so premature siyang pinanganak, sa awa ng Diyos buhay siya. Nung nakita ko siya, dali-dali kami kumbaga, sila din kasi hindi nila ina-expect na buhay pa din ako. So, sila lahat buhay sa awa ng Diyos. Yung nag-decide kami na bumalik, ay ako, balikan ko yung bahay ko. Hindi ko na talaga nakita. Hindi ko na alam kung saan yung bahay ko, kung saan banda, at saka yung pinaghirapan ko na pagkatagal-tagal. Kumbaga yun lang yung masakit sa akin. May higaan akong nabili, talagang wala pang 1 buwan ko na-enjoy yun. Lahat, wala ang nakita ko lang doon. Yung haligi na kasintasabot. Baga wala lahat ng pinaghirapan ko. Wala yun ng isang iglap. Doon talaga sabi ko lang sa sarili ko, makakabangon ba kami? Hanggang kailan to? Talagang back to zero kami. Wala kahit ano, wala kahit damit, wala kahit... Doon ko nakita hanggang kailan kami ganito, hanggang kailan kami maghihirap.
Your Honor, may we be allowed to ask additional questions for clarification or elaboration?
Please go ahead.
Maraming salamat, Arthur, sa madamdamin mong kwento. Ano ang naging epekto sa'yo ng bagyong ito pagkatapos humagugupit ng Yolanda? Personal na.
Kung magkaroon ako ng trauma, nagkaroon din ako ng anxiety at that time. Hindi ko alam kung anong kinatatakutan ko.
Bukod dito, sa kabuhayan mo ba, meron ba naging epekto?
Malaki masyado hanggang ngayon. Malaki masyado naging epekto. Kumbaga, hindi pa rin kami totally nakakabangon. Wala pa rin.
Sa iyong salaysay, nabanggit mo dito yung diskriminasyon na iyong naranasan. Maaari mo bang pakilahad briefly kung ano ito?
Kasi bilang isang leader doon sa community namin, kasi nasa permanent resettlement site kami ng Habitat for Humanity Philippines. Yun ang nagbigay ng bahay namin. Naghahakot kami ng mga ilang ililipat doon. Ililipat na mga, kasi ang pabor nilang ilipat doon is yung mga vulnerable sectors like mga PWD. Yun ang inaano ng Habitat for Humanity Philippines. Tapos nung time na yon na naglalakad-lakad ako, may isang mama na ililipat din doon na sabi, sino ba tong baklang to na paarahara sa daan? So ngayon may nakarinig doon sa sinabi niya. Sabi naman nung dating nakaano doon, sabi sa kanya, hindi mo ba alam na yun yung presidente dito? Yung presidente natin. Parang nangingisa ng sorry. No, sinabi ko din naman sa kanya, paano kung nagkataon na hindi ako presidente? Di, ganun din ang pag-aano nila sa akin kasi siyempre, sino ba tong baklang to na pahara-hara? So parang, sandali, kung hindi pala ako naging presidente dito, kung hindi nyo ako leader, ganun na lang ang itatrato nyo. Paano kung naging ordinaryo? Hindi ko naman sinasabing ganun ako tao. Paano kung naging ordinaryo lang ako?
Bahayan ba, meron bang mga inalok na livelihood programs sa NGO o ang gobyerno ng mga panahong iyon?
Yun ang masakit kung bakit doon din ako nag-umpisang mag-ingay. O sa totoo lang. Kasi bilang community leader doon sa temporary shelter namin, way back nung nasa temporary shelter kami, doon sa mga o TRS, kasi ang bunk houses iba. So sa TRS kami nilagay. Maraming pumupunta, maraming kumakatak. Arthur, ilan ang buntis dito sa inyo? Arthur, ilan ang babae dito sa inyo? Arthur, ilan ang lalaki dito sa inyo at may mga livelihood kami para sa kanila. Arthur, ilan ang nagpapasuso. Arthur, ilan ang buntis. But suddenly, hindi pa ginagawa yung makakabuntis sa akin. Diba? Tatanungin lang ko lang ang buntis kasi yun ang may livelihood. Hindi man lang sa dinami-dami, yung 11 months namin doon sa temporary shelter, wala man lang nagtanong, Arthur, ilan ang bakla dito? Ang tumboy dito at meron kaming livelihood para sa kanila. Nilubutation ako. Bibigyan ako ng livelihood na carpentry or masonry. So parang ganun, hindi ganun kadali yung dinanas namin kay Yolanda.
Sa mga nasabi mo na Arthur, mayroon ka pa bang huling gustong sabihin?
Nakakapagwaray ako, may sasabihin ako. Kung sakasakaling may magbibigay sa ngayon, parang may gusto lang ako parating sa gobyerno o kung kanino, itry naman kasi nilang tanungin yung tao. Hindi sila magdidikta o hindi nila didiktahan yung tao. Tanungin nila kung ano talaga ang kailangan. Hindi yung sasabihin na may ibibigay kami sa inyo ganito. Tanungin naman kasi kami ang nakakaalam. Kami ang may alam at kami kasi ang dapat tinatanong. Hindi ipupunta doon may kayo. So parang sa ganon ang gusto kong iparating. At sakang isa pa, dito sa mga malalaking kumpanya kung saan hindi ko man masabi na sila talaga ang liable o kasi ako talagang wala din akong alam. Base lang sa mga naririnig ko at base sa mga pinupuntahan ko. Dapat gumawa din sila ng alternatibo lalo na itong ating mga petroleum companies. Gumawa sila ng alternatibo na hindi para sa iisang kapakanan ng iisa, yung sa kapakanan ng nakararami. Kagaya ngayon, doon sa amin meron ng solar na jeepney o e-jeep. Ba't hindi sila gumawa ng ganun na hindi naman tayong lahat, hindi ang lahat nagsasakripisyo sa dinudulot? Kasi parang sa pagkakaalam ko nasa 65%.
70%, tama ba ako? Yung carbon na naaano dun sa mga petrol. So parang gumawa sila ng alternatibo.
Maraming salamat, Arthur. That will be all for our witness, Your Honors.
Pwede pa ako mag-ano.
Oh, sige, Arthur.
Isa din kami sa nagpapasalamat, Your Honors, lalo na sa Greenpeace International, na kaming mga maliliit, nabigyan ng pagkakataon na maipahayag o marinig kung ano yung mga naranasan namin at saka kung ano talaga ang kailangan namin. Yun lang po at maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
Your Honor, wait lang, Arthur. Your Honor, that will be all for our questioning, Your Honor, unless you do have questions.
The members of the panel will now field questions to the witness. We will start with Commissioner Armamento.
Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning po, Your Honor.
I would like to know, during your lifetime, you're now 42 years old, have you experienced a similar kind of weather disturbance before Yolanda?
Hindi po. Parang ang mga na-experience lang namin noon, yung simpleng bagyo, Your Honor.
Follow-up question. Can you tell us what do you think are the changes in your community or in the physical environment that contributed to the worsening weather disturbance in Tacloban City?
Malaki po, Your Honor, yung naging contribute, masama ba?
Try ko Tagalogin, Arthur. Bisaya din kasi.
Bisaya na lang, ma'am.
Kaya lang, summer ka, karaya ako. Ganito na lang. Di ba sa lifetime mo, sabi mo, worst ngayon ang nangyayari. Ano ang sa tingin mo, mga nagbago sa lugar ninyo na naging contributory siya or siyang nagiging dahilan kung bakit mas grabe ngayon ang mga bagyo?
Sa akin, sa totoo lang, magmula nung nag-Yolanda is, ang dami, napansin ko, ang dami ng sasakyan ng Tacloban. Naka-experience na rin kami ng traffic doon, na kung dati hindi naman ganun ka-traffic. Sabi namin, bakit mula nung nag-Yolanda, dumami tuloy ang mayayaman? Dumami ang may mga sasakyan. So, nagiging cost din yun kasi ng ano natin.
Commissioner Gwen Pimentel-Gana will now ask questions.
May buntag.
May buntag mo, Your Honor.
Okay. Katulad ng sinabi ni Comlea, ano sa unawa mo, sa iyong pagkaintindi ba, ang rason nga nun nagbaha?
Sa pagkakaintindi ko din po, nang dahil din po kasi ito sa ating climate change, sa kung saan nalaman ko lang ito nung after Yolanda, kung ano ang climate change, kung ano ang dahilan ng climate change, at kung sino ang gumagawa at kung paano nagkakaroon nito. Parang ganun
Kung
po.
sa Tacloban, ano kaya ang immediate cause sa tingin mo, sa Tacloban mismo?
Sa Tacloban siguro yung walang habas na, kasi parang hindi rin naman madaming puno doon, yung sa basura po. Kasi parang basura ang parang ibinalik din sa Tacloban ang basura na galing na parang ang iitim na galing na sa ilalim ng dagat.
Okay, so on another matter, no, sabi mo na a few weeks before na nagkaroon ng baha, the local government already prepared you.
Yes.
Diba? Nasabihan ba kayo? Paano nila kayo hinanda sa darating na bagyo?
Actually, in fairness naman sa City Government of Tacloban, talagang inalinglo yung tao. Talagang sinabihan nila, prepare talaga sila. Although ang mga tao kulang kasi kulang pa ng kaalaman regarding sa preparedness kung pag-uusapan. Kasi umano na lang naman yan nung nag-Yolanda. Halos kumbaga na bugbog sa training yung mga tao. Ang mga tao lang talaga, kahit ako, hindi ko sisihin ang gobyerno, kung hindi ang sarili ko. Kung bakit nagkaroon kadami ang casualties nang dahil doon, siyempre, hindi mo naman kasi iisipin. Sinong nakakaintindi ng storm surge? even yung mga ano doon. Pero kung sinabing mag-tsunami or tidal wave, possible pa na ang mga tao makinig. Pero sa storm surge, wala. Kahit ang kumbaga, nalaman na lang namin yung storm surge nung nangyari na ang Yolanda, na tubig pala, malaking alon din pala yun o malaking tubig. So wala talagang makakaroon. May storm surge na dadating, mga tao kiber. Wala akong pakialam. Kaya malay ko ba kung ano yan. So talagang kahit kami. Wala, ganun talaga kung bakit nagkaroon ng, nasa tao din, ayaw talagang lumipat kasi hindi pa naman naka-experience ng kung ano-anong mga kalamidad na ganun.
So parang may information naman na binigay.
Oo.
Kaya lang hindi naintindihan din.
Yes,
mo.
Your Honor. Parang maganda din yung ano ng Tacloban. Talagang nag-ikot din naman sila.
Doon sa sinabi mo about yung livelihood program na binigay, na sinabi mo nga na yung gender issue doon, kasi sinabi sa mga lalaki, sa mga babae, no? Ito bang livelihood program na ino-offer ng gobyerno is actually most of the time ganun lang ang treatment, babae, lalaki, wala, hindi mo ba naisip na kung siguro itong binigay na livelihood, kahit na sinabi nilang lalaki, pwede naman pasukan din ng babae yon, di ba? Or meron talagang mga lalaki, ito lang sa inyo, mga babae, ito lang sa inyo, ano?
Opo, kasi ganun po, Your Honor, ang nangyayari. Pag pumupunta sila, iilan ang babae, iilan ang lalaki. So parang may time pa nga na may isa akong kaibigan na may nagbibigay kasi ng mga fish cages, yung mga fish cages, opo, yung sa ano, parang hindi siya pinasali kasi bakla nga daw siya. Samantalang may mga babae naman nakasali. So may mga diskriminasyon talaga nangyayari at that time.
So nakikita nyo sa
Kita,
implementation.
opo, kita talaga, at saka hindi lang kita, ramdam na ramdam talaga.
Thank you.
Welcome po.
Commissioner Karen Gomez-Tumpit, you may now field your questions.
Maupay nga aga.
Mapay din nga aga.
Pwede ba kitang tawaging Jean?
Yes po, Your Honor.
Jean, tatanong ko lang, nasabi na yung eksperyensya mo tungkol sa bagyo o sa weather, tapos yung mga assistance na binigay sa inyo na hindi kayo tinatanong kung anong kailangan ninyo. Pero matanong ko lang, meron bang mga pribadong kumpanya na tumulong, na alam mong tumulong sa komunidad? Katulad ng carbon majors na sinasabi. Meron bang nag-reach out na pribadong kumpanya doon sa pagtulong sa mga nasalanta ng Yolanda?
Marami, madam. Marami, Your Honor. Kagaya nung yung Shell Foundation. Tumulong din sila sa amin in terms of mga disaster preparedness.
Pero yung after, nung nasalanta na kayo at nangangailangan kayo ng mga basic na pangangailangan, meron bang katulad ng Shell Foundation, tumulong ba sila sa inyo?
Hindi, yung Shell Foundation ngayon na, after na nung ano na talaga, after na nung maraming nagbigay, pero mga INGOs, galing sa ibang bansa, yun yung talaga yung nakatulong sa amin. Pero yung para na nakikipag-coordinate lang sila sa city government of Tacloban.
So nakasalalay dun sa city government yung pag-distribute ng tulong sa inyo.
Yes po, Your Honor.
Okay, salamat, Jean.
The chair of the commission might want to field in some questions.
Magandang umaga, Jean.
Magandang umaga din po, Your Honor.
At salamat sa iyong pagkatatag, pagpupundar para sa sarili at sa pamilya mo. Bago pa dumating ang sakuna at kahit nung natapos na, patuloy kang bibigay lakas di lamang sa pamilya mo, kundi sa komunidad mo bilang leader. At gusto kitang bigyan ng pagpupugay dahil sa tibay ng loob mo. Gusto ko lang mag-follow up sa ilang mga tanong. Sabi mo sa tanong ni Commissioner Karen na nadatnan mo, na enkwentro mo na yung ilang institusyon ng carbon majors ay tumugon rin. Pero kailan po nangyari yon? Yung sabi mo, bigay ng Shell Foundation ay disaster preparedness seminars, no? Yun ba?
Opo, Your Honor.
Kailan nangyari yan? Isa, dalawa, tatlong taon
Last
pagkatapos?
month.
Nung nakaraang buwan.
Ditong ano lang, itong taon lang na to.
Yung mga nakaraang yung mas malapit sa kuna.
Actually, ang Philippine National Foundation, nagbigay din sila ng bahay doon sa mga vicinity ng area nila sa Tacloban, yung sa may depot nila. Yun yung kinuha nilang community na binigyan nila ng pabahay. I think 150 or 180 units.
Siyempre, kung pabahay po yan, mas maaga po yan. Hindi lang nung 1 month ago.
Yung pabahay. Pero yung mga preparedness na ginawa nila is last month, I think. Basta kasi ako din ang nag-facilitate.
It might be useful for us to maybe write a letter of inquiry to the Philippine Shell Foundation about what programs they did in the area soon after. Just to get a sense about the corporate social responsibility approaches. I'd also be interested actually in knowing what the content of the seminars would be. In particular, is there any references in their teaching or education that has to do with the impact of pollution on climate change, or their activities on climate change? If there's some form of acknowledgement, because I think this is relevant due to what we've been hearing over the last few sessions about denial. And I'd like to know if there is change that's happening, if any. And ultimately, if there is, then perhaps from denial to acknowledgement might begin. Pangalawa, gusto ko lang ma-check. Sabi mo, nung natapos yung sa kuna, ang una ninyong kinalagyan ay sa habitat. Tama po ba yan?
No, yung temporary shelter po, Your Honor. Sa yung parang mga sawasawali na bahay.
Nagtagal po kayo doon? O nakabalik na po ba kayo sa dati?
11 months po kami doon, Your Honor. Sa ngayon po, naandito na kami sa Habitat for Humanity housing units.
Okay, so
Permanent
nagkaroon
shelter
ng temporary muna, yung mga sawasawali.
Yes po.
Pagkatapos ng 11 buwan, nakalipat ka na sa mas permanente.
Yes po, Your Honor.
Yung sa habitat na.
Yes po.
Tapos, itong sa habitat, hindi po ito sa lugar kung saan ka may bahay dati.
Hindi po, Your Honor. Kasi yung lugar ko po dati is sa Barangay 88, yung most devastated area po ng Tacloban. Doon po kami galing na inilipat kami doon. After 8 months, 8 months pa din po kami doon sa Barangay 88 before po kami na-transfer dito sa temporary shelter.
So, una, 8 buwan kayo doon sa 88, yung pinaka-devastated.
Opo.
Tapos, temporary shelter ng 11 months. Tapos ngayon sa habitat.
Opo.
Ano po na nangyari doon sa Barangay 88? Pinapayagan pa bang may titirik na mga bahay doon?
Actually, Your Honor, parang ayaw na po sanang anuhan takas. Doon lalo na yung area na pinanggalingan namin, hindi na po talaga ina-allowed na pabahayan kasi talagang pasok po siya sa 40 meters no-build zone. Ang nangyayari kasi talagang yung ating mga kapatid talagang basta yun na yun. Kami talaga nung sinabi, kasi nung around anong time na yun na kahit umano lang ako sa dagat, parang feeling ko na andyan na naman si Yolanda. Talagang umalis ka agad kami doon kung hindi doon sa trapal. Trapal lang yung 8 months na tinirahan namin. As in, yung sako lang yung bubong namin. Kasi gusto nga talaga namin matransfer doon sa mas mataas na lugar. Kung saan hindi na kami aabutin.
Maganda rin yung paliwanag mo ngayon na mayroong pinipilit na ipatupad na mitigating and remediation effort, no build zones na malapit sa shoreline at iba pa. At sinasabi mo o in-imply mo, sabi mo ganun na yon. na mahirap ma-enforce. Baka I note that earlier in the manifestation there was a resolution from the city of Tacloban in support of this process. I wondered if it might be useful as part also of our inquiry to find out what local governments, particularly in these areas devastated, have undertaken in terms of my lessons learned from this process. Kasalukuyan ba ay pinuno ka pa rin sa inyong lugar?
Yes po, Your Honor.
Yung samahan ng mga nakatira?
Yes po, yung Homeowners Association po ng ano namin.
Liban po doon, ikaw ba ay isang leader ng mga LGBT?
At the same time po, Your Honor.
So may asosasyon rin po kayo?
Yes po.
Na-document po ba ninyo itong, may nakwento ka, ikaw naranasan mong medyo may discriminatory statements pero humingi naman ng paumanhin nung nalaman na presidente ka at napaisip ka, kung hindi ka lang presidente, baka nagpatuloy yon. Nabanggit mo merong isang hindi napagbigyan na fish cage dahil yung mga ganun bang mga insidente bilang komunidad ng LGBT nasulat po ninyo at sabihin para at least malaman po natin.
Hindi po, Your Honor, kasi parang pinagbaliwala lang naman namin yun at that time. Nung kasagsagan kasi yun ng ng Yolanda. So after dun kasi nagsimula na rin kaming lumabas. Maybe that issue is na sa ibang mga ang tawag nito mga kagaya nila. Parang ang Oxfam po yata nito, yung Oxfam na ay NGO dun sa issue. Kasi yun yung dati yung gumawa sa amin. Kumbaga sila ang gumabay sa amin for almost 3 years, I think.
So, yung pakipag-ugnayan nyo sa isang INGO na Oxfam, napansin mo, may sensitivity o pagkabukas sa gender issue.
Yes po, Your Honor.
Pero sa iba, nakita nyo rin po ba yon? O nagpatuloy po ba yung naranasan ninyong diskriminasyon bilang LGBT?
Sa ngayon po, Your Honor, parang medyo nabawas-bawasan. Medyo nabawas-bawasan na yung mga diskriminasyon ng mga LGBT doon sa amin.
Ugnay na rin po yan dahil nagkumpul kayo, nanindigan at nagpahayag. Sinabi nyo mali ito.
Yes po, Your Honor.
Pero makakatulong pa rin po sa amin kahit konti, itong mga naranasan ng mga panahon na yon maisulat lang nang at least makita po namin yung mga uri ng diskriminasyon kung meron man kayong naranasan bilang komunidad. Nabanggit mo sa simula nung nagpakilala ka na matagal kang kilalang bilang Jean.
Yes po, Your Honor.
Pero dahil nga sa nasalanta kayo, kinailangan mong bumalik sa pangalan mong Arthur. Pwede mo bang ipaliwanag kung bakit?
Kasi po, nung nag-Yolanda na, yun nga po kaya sinabi ko kanina, isa po kasi ako, kumbaga ako nakiusap doon sa DSWD, kung po pwede po, ako ang mag-head ng family namin. Kasi si tatay hindi na able, at saka si nanay din hindi na, kasi matanda na nga. So parang mas nag-prepare ako na lang. So pali sila ang magiging cargo ko. Sabi ng DSWD, pwede naman. So yun na, kaya kailangan kong gamitin talaga yung pangalan ko para doon sa mga list. At saka doon sa area kasi namin, hindi ka po pwedeng ma-elect as homeowners officer kung hindi ikaw mismo or kung hindi ang asawa mo. Kung anak lang, hindi pwede. Kailangan, ka talaga, house owner or ang asawa ang pwedeng ma-elect as officer.
So, kinailangan mong gamitin yung pangalan mo sa civil registry para makakuha ng serbisyo publiko?
Opo, Your Honor.
Para makilalang bilang pinuno at house owner at head of the family?
Opo, Your Honor.
So, sa tingin mo, okay lang po ba yon? O kailangan rin po ba natin bilang bahagi ng mga rekomendasyon na maaaring tingnan ng Commission on Human Rights, itong, sabihin natin yung gender-based identification after birth. No? Siyempre, nasa mga dokumento ninyo yan, pero hindi ko lang alam na sa pagunlad ng panahon, napapanahon mo po ba sa karanasan mo na yung gender-based identity ninyo mas bigyan ng, sabihin natin, legal support?
Yes po, Your Honor. Talagang kung ba malugod na tatanggapin yan ng komunidad ng LGBT. Baka suportang bonggang-bonggang maibigay dyan.
Of course, kailangan pag-aralan po yan, no? Dahil nung panahon na naipanganak ka, yan ang naibigay sa iyong pangalan.
Yes po, Your Honor.
Bagamat hindi mo masyado nagamit.
Masama ang loob ko talaga. Pero okay lang.
Tapos, nung kinailangan na, no, dahil kailangan magpakilala, siguro nawala pa lahat ng mga legal documents mo, no?
Yes po, Your Honor. Opo,
So,
wala
kailangan ma-reconstruct.
Opo.
So, nagpapakilala ka. Ako si Jean.
Walang record dito. So, Your Honor, parang naibalik din kasi maraming mga ahensya din ang tumulong sa amin na makuha yung mga legal documents po na.
Mahalaga po yan. Actually, this is one issue we have been encountering time and time again in the context of conflict, disaster, whether natural or man-made, as people leave and become internally displaced persons. Often, they are unable to access public services without appropriate formal or legal documentation. And so we do really need to take a look in a big way as to what all the different agencies are doing to ensure that these legal documentations to be able to access services are provided to the victims in the soonest and quickest possible time. Salamat ulit, Jean. Baka meron ka pang gustong ihayag bago natin ibukas pa sa ibang mga tanong.
Okay na po ako, Your Honor, at maraming salamat din po sa inyo.
Thank you, Chairman Calix.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Father Pedro Walpol, would you have questions for the witness?
Salamat. Jane, sa bahay mo na yun, ligon ba, matibay ba yung bahay? Parang satisfied ka dyan? Safe?
So far po, Father, ano po siya, talagang, actually, ang resilient na term is nalaman ko lang din yun after Yolanda. Oo, so far, sabi nila typhoon resilient daw, at saka parang okay naman po yung pundasyon ng bahay namin. May mga ibang, ano lang po, yung sa ibang, no comment, basta yung sa amin, okay po yung bahay po namin.
Malayo ba? Saan yung bahay mo na? Kaysa dati nandun ka sa sentro, sa 88, pero na yun, saan yung bahay? Malapit din sa Tacloban?
Medyo malayo-layo po kasi naandun na po kami sa may area ng malayo sa dagat. 15 pesos na po ang pamasahe from downtown to norte. Sa northern part na po kami ng Tacloban sa ngayon. Yung dati 8 pesos or 9 pesos lang po yung pamasahe namin from downtown to Barangay 88.
Yeah. Okay. So, para sa iyo, nandun ka doon sa norte, ano ba yung climate change sa iyo?
Sa totoo lang po, hindi ko masyadong kabisado ang climate change. So parang, ang ano lang namin noon na pag gumawa ka ng hindi maganda or yung mga polluted, for example, like itong mga nagsusunog, yun lang po ay naiintindihan namin. Wala po talaga kami idea at that time about climate change. Kung hindi nagyulanda, hindi nila sinabi, ay kasi kagagawan nito ni ganon, kagagawan ni ganito. So parang, base lang po sa mga naririnig po namin, Father.
Okay, so kung may sunod na bagyo, anong gawin nyo? Anong gagawin nyo? Yung isip nyo sa bagong lugar, okay naman, safe kayo, di kailangan mag-evacuate?
Opo, Father. Talagang kumbaga para sa amin kasi nalipat, siguro naman ang gobyerno natin yun lang ang masasabi ko. Hindi naman siguro kami nila ililipat doon kung talagang kailangan pa namin ulit lumipat pagdating ng bagyo o kung anong mga sakuna. Kasi pagkakaintindi ko sa kanila, ginawan kami ng bahay na resilient. So para sa akin, hindi namin kailangan maglipat kasi yun ang sabi nila na na daw yung bahay namin matibay.
Okay. Maraming salamat.
Welcome po.
Thank you very much, Father Walpole. I have no further questions for the witness. The witness may now be excused. Thank you very much. Counsels, you may now proceed to present your next set of witnesses.
Good morning again, Your Honors. Our next witnesses are two experts from the Manila Observatory, Drs. Mayceline Thelma Vicente and Dr. Rosa Perez.
Please swear in the witnesses. So this is an innovation which we have made with the inquiry. Here we are presenting two witnesses simultaneously because the witnesses have manifested that they will be more comfortable if they will be allowed to testify together as one group. So, counsel, please go ahead. Now, first, let's swear in the two witnesses.
Please raise your right hand. Please start the vote. Kindly state your name, citizenship, and your address.
I'm Mayceline Vicente, Filipina, from the Manila Observatory.
I am Rosa Perez, Filipina, and I am from Manila Observatory.
Counsel, you may now proceed to examine your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Mayceline Thelma Vicente is a specialist on geological information system and remote sensing, while Dr. Rosa Perez is a meteorologist. And as I said a while ago, they're both experts from the Manila Observatory. We are offering them as resource persons and witnesses to be able to share the most recent climate scenarios, as well as their study on children's vulnerability to climate change and disaster impacts. But before we proceed, Your Honors, we have 4 documents that we want them identified. May we
Please proceed.
So, Doctors Vicente and Dr. Rosa Perez, I have here an abstract, 1-page abstract. Could you identify this, please?
Yeah, I recognize that this was the abstract that I sent through email.
Yes. There is a brief curriculum vitae in the name of Dr. Rosa Perez. Do you recognize this document? And there is also, this consists of 4 pages, and there's a curriculum vitae of Dr. Mayceline Thelma Vicente consisting of 26 pages. Could you please identify this?
Yes, this is the one I submitted.
Excuse me, counsel. Just for the record, so that the responses can be captured by our stenographer, could you please speak to the mic? There are 2 microphones. One can be given to the counsel, and the other one to the witnesses.
Okay. Our apologies, Your Honor.
No problem. Thank you.
And the last document, Dr. Perez and Vicente, is a country scoping study consisting of 27 pages. Do you recognize this PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
That's the full transcript. Yes.
Okay. These 4 documents, Your Honors, have been previously marked. Last August 22nd, 2018, the abstract has been pre-marked as MMMM for M's, the curriculum vitae of Dr. Rosa Perez as Exhibit NNN, N for N's, the curriculum vitae of Dr. May Vicente has been pre-marked as Exhibit 0000, 4 O's. And the last document, Your Honor, referring to country scoping studies to build evidence on children's vulnerabilities, has been pre-marked as Exhibit PPPPP, 5Ps. Could we get a confirmation from Attorney Martinez Guerra on the
Excuse
pre-marking?
me, before you confirm, Attorney Esguerra, you said 5 Ps, but in the manifestation that you presented, submitted to us, there are only 4 Ps. Exhibit PPPP, 2PPPP-26.
Okay. Well, we apologize, Your Honor. This is supposed to be 4 Ps.
All right.
Okay. PPPP, but probably this, we understand that since Dr. Vicente made a slight change on one of the slides, probably that's the slight error. So we beg your indulgence on that error. So can we seek a confirmation now? Your Honor?
Will Attorney Esguerra confirm the pre-markings? All right, so it has been corrected as manifested earlier by Attorney Mayo Anda. You may now proceed to examine your witnesses.
So may we now call on the experts. This is a shared presentation, Your Honors. And I understand that Dr. Vicente will start first.
I'll lead, and then I will let Dr. Rosa explain the climate scenarios, and then it will be, it's back to me. Yes.
Okay. Please
Please go
proceed.
ahead.
So, yes, this is entitled Country Scoping Studies to Build Evidence on Children's Vulnerabilities to Climate Change and Disaster Impacts in the Philippines. It was a report submitted to the UNICEF Philippines by the Manila Observatory last 4 September 2014. So about 4 years ago. And the outline of the presentation includes risk variables that we investigated, the climate change impact chain and children's vulnerabilities, climate hazards, exposures, vulnerabilities, risks, and conclusions and recommendations. So this is very small. So your honors may not be able to see it from the monitor, but let me explain that this framework follows the concept that risk is a function of hazards, exposures, and vulnerabilities. In the study, for hazards, we primarily concentrated on temperature and rainfall. And for exposures, we considered the number of children and youth and the exposure of children to physical and social hazards by type, especially related to climate change. So the bullet points refer to topics we covered, while the checkpoints, as I edited, are the topics where we found secondary data on. So under vulnerabilities, which is the focus of the study, we considered child socioeconomic profiles, child security, and then child health and nutrition, child mortality and causes, child development, child adaptive capacity and resilience, and links to water and food security and shortage. So under the bullet points, we marked as check those topics or indicators where we found secondary information on, but the negative marks reflect a dearth of information at that time of the study in 2014. And the next slide refers to a simplified impact chain undertaken by Dr. Rosa Perez, where you have climate change and associated geohazards affecting physical changes such as environmental degradation and destruction, in turn affecting economic situations or conditions, uh, as well as impacts on children. Such impacts on children include decline in socio-economic status, threats to child development and rights, child decline in child health and nutrition, as well as threats to child security. Um, Doc Rosa will now explain the climate hazards in two versions at the time of the report, considering stress scenarios, and the next slide using the latest so-called representative concentration pathways.
In the scientific community, we use scenarios for future, to see the future impacts, risk, and hazards. But for this, we only cover the hazard part, which are the climate variables. During the time of the study, we use the prevailing um, model, which is the SRES, or the so-called um, emission scenarios from the special report by the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This SRES is based on storylines. No? They have in the future, if there is a population, what you call increase or decrease. There is also the state of economy in the future, which we call near future and far future. The near future is the 2025, and the far future is around 2050. And of course, the farthest one is 2100, the end of this century. This SRES during the time of the study was so constrained because you cannot change the storyline. It is a what if the conditions are this and the future will become that. Okay, so it's a what if and then. So the IPCC has changed this to the so-called representative concentration pathways. In the representative concentration pathways, the current projected climate change scenarios, this use the amount of greenhouse gases that has already been emitted to the atmosphere. So it's a more realistic scenario because it starts with the current condition. And then with modeling, it develops to, let's say, a future which is worst case, which means we do not do anything about the situation. And the best case is we do something about the situation. So that's the RCPs, we call it. And the advantage of the current scenario is that you can introduce some policy changes into the scenario. So along the way, you might have started with the worst case scenario, but along the way, you introduce mitigations. In climate change parlance, when we say mitigation, we meant avoiding or reducing greenhouse gas emission. Okay, so that the impacts will also be lessened, which coincide now with the definition in the disaster community. So basically, that's the difference of the two scenarios. But during our study, we used the earlier SRES, which is the best case during that time, which means it is a balanced use of resources. The population increased, but there is a tapering or peaking in the 2050 and then decreasing population towards the end of this century. So it's a best case scenario. Thank you. when we use the different scenarios, we arrive at different hazards. So for the RCPs, with the exception of mountainous regions, there are more than 26 degree in the temperature will increase uniformly and minimally. So the increase in the temperature is more gradual than what the previous one, the SRES. That's why some of us are being called doomsayers, because the earlier scenarios are quite grim, but the RCPs are more realistic. And RCP 8.5 worst case scenario, the driest rainfall could go beyond 40% reduction. Still, there is some grim pictures, but it's not like the SRES, which is unrealistic. And the RCP 8.5 is already the worst, so it cannot get worse than that scenario. The increase in Luzon. So in Luzon, basically, we'll have an increase in rainfall, but in Mindanao, there will be a decrease. So that is the picture of the future using the RCPs. Thank you. But I would like to say that the variability of the rainfall is within, as the Pagasa, because the Pagasa is the one who generated this scenario, is within the natural variability. That means that what we are observing now, it is something like that, but can only be enhanced by climate change or the increase in temperature, or global warming, we call it.
So we segue into exposures. So we covered number of children in 2000, 2003, and 2006. 2000 is dark green in the bar chart. 2003 is light green in the middle bar chart. And 2006 is moderate green in 2006. So as you can see, there are a very, very slight increases in number of children through the years, with concentration in the central Luzon area, and with emerging higher number of children in the axis across Bicol to the Visayas. And then for vulnerabilities, we were able to map children in poverty by region and by province in 2006. So here you have greater number of children in poverty in the central Luzon area. Children in poverty. And then in the central Visayas, with the very moderate numbers in the Mindanao area. So that's children in poverty. We go now to vulnerabilities. In terms of child labor, chemical, biological, and environmental hazards to which working children are exposed threaten their health and safety. When environmental ecological conditions are already poor, natural hazards exacerbate these further. Sensitivities of child exposure to slow and rapid onset disasters must be analyzed as by established impact chains earlier shown. Actually, that impact chain is more complex, but there was a request from UNICEF to simplify it for a better understanding. We segue now into migration of parents and families. These are found to be increasing towards less hazard-prone areas, and or to those areas where better economic opportunities are available. There is a rise in children affected by loss and constrained household livelihoods and incomes. Oh, wala. Okay. On displacement. So poor children who are displaced or separated from families um, are particularly vulnerable to violence, such as child trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. Child victims are from disadvantaged communities, mostly in remote areas, and have only basic education. They also belong to households below the poverty line. Children, as such, are easier to recruit and attract, especially because of the promise of high salaries and better opportunities in major cities. On poor child health and nutrition, these are directly attributed to inadequate food intake and diseases. Poverty that leads to household food insecurity are attributed to unavailability of food both in quality and quantity. Child morbidity and mortality, including diarrhea, malaria, and malnutrition, are directly affected by climatic parameters such as temperature and rainfall. In effect, poor children are particularly vulnerable to climate change, as they live in areas with common and major climate-sensitive health outcomes such as malnutrition, diarrhea, and malaria. They are also highly sensitive to consequences of climate changes. On hunger, so hard to read it. About I cannot see it. Okay. About 1.7 families were food poor in 2003. Food poverty thresholds increased by 26% from 2006 to 2009, compared to only 22% between 2003 and 2006. In 2009 also, food poor household had incomes just below or equal to the monthly food threshold of about 3,395.42 pesos. In 2010, approximately 39% of children aged 0 to 10 experience severe food deprivation. Growing infants and children without enough food are expected to experience physical and cognitive setbacks. This will especially prevent the attainment of Millennium Development Goals, so which are now Sustainable Development Goals. So the map shows quality of life index among children by region in 2006. And as you can see, the darker the color, the less the quality of life. So the upper portion of Luzon is better than the southern half of the Philippines in terms of quality of life among children in 2006. Next slide. Okay. In terms of children experiencing severe deprivation of sanitation facilities in 2006, there is another map which is similar to that for quality of life, except that things are clearly better for children in the upper half of Luzon and moderately in Mindanao. So in the southern Luzon, Visayas, towards Palawan, there are severe deprivation of sanitary facilities. On morbidity and causes, diarrhea, malaria, and respiratory diseases have aggravating effects worsened by undernutrition. Malaria is one of the serious health problems especially across children. It is the eighth leading cause of morbidity. There were 48 cases per 100,000 in 2002. The prevalence is high in Mindanao at 53%, Luzon at 46%, and Visayas at 1%. There are provinces that are listed here where there are most cases, namely Palawan, Tawi-Tawi, Agusan del Sur, Sulu, Davao del Sur, Isabela, Davao del Norte, Compostela Valley, Apayao, and Cagayan. There are more than 1 million deaths each year with respect to pregnant women and children under 5. With increasing temperatures, malaria may arise and or return to places where they once were eradicated through programs and development practices. On child mortality and causes, these are directly proportional to the educational level and wealth status of the mother and family, respectively. The infant mortality rate for mothers without education is high at 65 per 1,000 live births. There are only 15 per 1,000 live births for mothers with higher educational attainment. Then, from 1995 to 2003, poor households have higher under 5 infant mortality rate than wealthier households. There is also higher infant mortality rate that could be linked to the mother's age. The older mother during pregnancy have higher risk levels due to biological factors and complications. On education literacy, status of enrollment, and dropouts. Out of school children arise from employment opportunities, lack of personal interest, housekeeping responsibilities, and high cost of education. Among socioeconomic factors, there is high prevalence of poverty, so a high dropout rate. Children opt often to become economically active to help sustain their households. Climate change will exacerbate educational status and deteriorating nutritional and health conditions render children unfit for school. The next slide is a map showing child experiencing severe deprivation by water. So in the in the areas around the mountain province, there is high deprivation of water. And then from central Luzon around Metro Manila down to Mindanao, there are high levels, moderate to high levels of water deprivation. We go now to combined HEVs, hazards, exposures, and vulnerabilities or risk. Okay, so you have the first map to the upper left as the number of children by region with a high concentration around Metro Manila and nearby southern Luzon. And there you have the Panay province and the southwestern Visayas and Mindanao. So, and then we already showed that poverty incidence in the upper right is shown by the map, where you have the upper Luzon area under better conditions in terms of poverty incidence than the southern Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And then we recall the climate scenarios that were undertaken using SRES in the bottom half of the PowerPoint for temperature to the lower left and rainfall to the lower right. So, conclusions and recommendations. Children are central to climate change and human security concerns. Children's issues are not yet, at the time of the study, well incorporated into environmental agenda, whether national, regional, or local. Climate change impacts broader sustainable development agenda, especially for poverty reduction and Millennium Development Goals, now named as Sustainable Development Goals and expanded. Strategies responsive to children's needs are necessary, especially towards better adaptation and resilience. Climate change would form major constraints to meeting MDG targets, especially concerning children. Children are also considered agents for social change. A human rights-based approach is needed to include children's issues. It's important to integrate children's agenda to governmental processes. Adaptation must incorporate children's perspectives. Opportunities for country-shared learnings and for local actions involving children and youth are required. Climate change definitely impacts on children, especially because of their sensitivity in the form of child vulnerability, as evidenced by impact chains. Partnerships are keys to success. The promotion of the roles and contribution of children and youth are necessary, but are challenges to climate change and disaster risk. Greater human security on a long-term basis is important to consider, especially since children growing up become also future policy and decision makers. There's a lack of accurate age-specific and spatially referenced local data on vulnerabilities of children, and the sensitivity of hazard exposure and vulnerability variables need to be researched and established so that targets and strategies in space and time may be addressed. Okay. So I will just breeze through. There are many frameworks from which we can learn from and adapt in the Philippine case for involving children in climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So these are ones from the Institute of Development Studies on Children and Climate Change. There's another one on the planning process and environmental education, which may involve children. And there's another one on how children's capacities may be developed so as they can participate better in the management of the environment as they grow up. So this is what the PowerPoint shows. Yes.
I just wish to say that this study is just a scoping. Attribution is a very complex research study. We cannot, this study is not meant to delve into a deeper attribution of the children's vulnerabilities to climate change. So this is just the surface. We need more research to be able to make reasonable conclusion about attribution. Thank you.
Thank you for your. Thank you, Drs. Vicente and Perez. Your Honors, can I ask just one question?
Please proceed.
Since you mentioned, Dr. Rosa, about the nature of the study, which is just a scoping, are you aware, Drs. Vicente and Perez, whether there have been additional studies since 2014 looking into children's vulnerabilities to climate change and disaster impacts?
The researches are very sporadic. They are not, systematically addressed to that kind of attribution. So while there are studies on current factors why children are vulnerable, these are not in the way of risk assessment. So that's one of our wish lists is to be able to continue this research.
I just know that following the study, maybe in a couple of months or a year, there was a call to establish a management information system. So I know that that may exist in UNICEF now. However, I'm not sure if it's spatial or geographic in nature, so that we can map um, risks across the country to children.
Last question is on the recommendations. If you know or are aware if any of the recommendations that you actually wrote in the study, have they been adopted by the government or any non-government institution?
I'm not aware of any move from the national level, but in the international scene, they are now bringing youth into the picture. Like in the UNFCCC, there are now some segments that the youth are properly represented, but these are not children. These are a little bit older than children, but still in the youth category.
May I just emphasize, because I think it's very important, that we acquire indicators and statistics on certain gaps, in very important gaps, on vulnerability like violence against children, conflict, uh, drug trafficking, child trafficking, uh, more common health problems and diseases arising from disasters. Also, I think those ones are.
Your Honor, please, if the commissioners have questions.
Thank you very much, Madam, to our two lady witnesses. Commissioner Armamento will ask you questions.
Good morning. Good morning, moms. I'm just curious because your study, although it's a scoping study, it shows that the worsening weather conditions increases the vulnerabilities of children. Is it safe for me to conclude then that the weather condition, the worsening weather condition, affects children and makes them more vulnerable?
There are manifestations of climate change on the environment. For example, on malnutrition, um, malnourished children are not the direct uh, if a result of climate change, but because food security is the one being affected by climate change. So it's really a chain of impacts. That's why it's very important to have this kind of analysis. I think the children's vulnerability is more on the downstream of the impact chain. So we have to be very careful also in the analysis so as not to make irrational conclusion that these are the direct effects of climate change.
Thank you.
Compimentel earlier manifested that she will have no questions for you. Commissioner Karen Dupit will also be waiving her asking of questions. Chairman Gascon? Oh, yes, left already. Father Walpole? Father Walpole will have no further questions. I have no further questions. Thank you very much to our witnesses.
Thank you, Drs. Perez and Vicente. Your
Maybe we can have a 5-minute break before we proceed to your next witness.
All rise. The Honorable Inquiry Panel Chairman, Commissioner Roberto Eugenio T. Cadiz, still presiding.
We are now resuming our session. Counsels, you may now present your next witness.
Good morning again, Your Honors. May we call our third witness or resource person, Mr. Richard Heede?
Correction, actually, Mr. Heede would be your fourth resource person because the previous testimonies were done in tandem by two.
Okay, Your Honors. We submit, Your Honors.
Good morning, Mr. Heede.
Your Honors, will the witness be sworn in?
Can we have the witness sworn in? Please go ahead.
Okay. Before the commission, do you swear to tell the truth? Or kindly raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the whole truth of your testimony and nothing but the truth?
I swear to tell nothing but the truth in my testimony.
Okay. Kindly state your name, your citizenship or nationality, and
My name is Richard Heede. I am an American citizen born in Norway, and my address is on Gateway Road in Snowmass, Colorado.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Witness, how do you want it to be addressed by this panel and this representation?
You may call me Richard, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Your Honors,
Thank you.
Richard leads Climate Accountability Institute's Disruptive Carbon Majors project, which traces carbon dioxide and methane emissions to the largest corporations that produce and market carbon fuels worldwide. The initial work was published in Climatic Change in 2014 with a lead story in The Guardian. RIC has analyzed potential emissions from oil, gas, and coal companies' proven reserves vis-a-vis the remaining carbon budget, and with colleagues has modeled the temperature and sea level rise attributable to major carbon producers. Richard also published his thesis, A Geography of Carbon, with National Center for Atmospheric Research in 1984, worked on energy efficiency and climate mitigation with Rocky Mountain Institute in 1984 to 2001. He created the consultancy Climate Mitigation Services in 2001 to inventory corporations, industrial facilities, municipalities, households, and aviation emissions. Richard is here to present the findings of the Carbon Majors publications, including the cumulative contribution from the investor-owned carbon majors to world emissions of industrial carbon dioxide and methane emissions. Your Honors, before we proceed with the presentation of Richard, may we be allowed to ask questions for identification of documents that he submitted before this Honorable Commission.
Please proceed.
Richard, I have here several documents that you submitted to this representation and to the Honorable Commission. I will read to them one by one, okay? And please tell this Honorable Commission if you confirm having submitted this documents. First is a profile and statement of Richard Heede, dated August 7, 2018, consisting of 12 pages, which was pre-marked as quadruple Q to quadruple Q-11. The curriculum vitae of Richard Heede, consisting of 6 pages, which was pre-marked as quadruple R to quadruple R-5. The printed PowerPoint presentation of Richard Heede, Climate Accountability Institute's sorry, were to quantify the contributions of carbon producers to climate change and climate damages, consisting of 12 pages, which was pre-Martis quadruple S to quadruple S-11. Climate Accountability Institute press release on update of carbon measures project consisting of 2 pages, which was pre-Martis quadruple T to quadruple T-1. And earlier we have pre-marked Climate Accountability Institute press release on update of carbon measures dated August 28, 2018, consisting of 2 pages. Pre-marked is quadruple T-A to quadruple T-A-1. Next document is the carbon measures accounting for carbon and methane emissions, 1854 to 2010. Methods and results report consisting of 104 pages. Pre-Martis exhibit quadruple U to quadruple U-103. This was previously marked as D-2. Next document is tracing anthropogenic carbon dioxide and methane emissions to fossil fuel and cement producers, 1854 to 2010, consisting of 15 pages, which was pre-marked as quadruple V to quadruple V-14. This was previously marked as D-3. Next document was supplementary materials tracing anthropogenic carbon dioxide and methane emissions to fossil fuel and cement producers, 1854 to 2010, consisting of 10 pages. Pre-marked as quadruple W to quadruple W-9. Next document is the climate responsibilities of industrial carbon producers, climatic change, consisting of 15 pages. Pre-marked as quadruple X to quadruple X-14. Next document is the potential emissions of carbon dioxide and methane from proved reserves of fossil fuels, an alternative analysis consisting of 9 pages. Pre-marked as quadruple Y to quadruple Y-8. The next document is the supplementary materials to potential emissions of carbon dioxide and methane from proved reserves of fossil fuels, an alternative analysis consisting of 4 pages. Pre-marked as quadruple Z to quadruple Z-3. The next document, the rise in global atmospheric carbon dioxide, surface temperature and sea level from emissions traced to major carbon producers, consisting of 14 pages, previously marked as Exhibit H to H-13. And finally, the last document, Carbon Producers Tar Pit, Dinosaurs Beware, the Path to Accountability of Fossil Fuel Producers for Climate Change and Climate Damages, consisting of 16 pages, pre-marked as quintuple A to quintuple A-15. Richard, do you confirm having submitted these documents to this Honorable Commission?
Yes, these are all documents I submitted in electronic format.
Do you confirm that the contents of these documents are true?
Yes.
Can we go back to the first document, which is your profile and statement, consisting of 12 pages?
Excuse me, Counsel, can you please turn on the microphone of Mr.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry for that, Your Honor.
Please go ahead.
In your profile and statement, dated August 7, 2018, consisting of 12 pages, on the 12th page, Richard, there appears a signature above the name Richard Heede. Whose signature is that, Richard?
That is my signature.
Do you confirm and affirm the statements you mentioned, stated in that profile and statement, Richard?
Yes, I confirm.
Thank you, Richard.
Counsel, before you proceed, I just noticed that you earlier manifested that exhibits H to H-13 were previously marked, but
Yes.
you did not indicate the previous marking. Could
Yeah.
you please clarify this for the record?
Yes, Your Honor. Exhibit H to H-13 was previously marked. That is the marking, Your Honor. We didn't change the marking. It was through a manifestation before, Your Honor.
All right. And just for clarification again, let's go back to exhibit quadruple T to quadruple T-1. It was stated that it was previously marked as D-1 as presented by a previous witness, I suppose.
No, Your Honor, because earlier, during the pre-marking we had last December 2017, you mentioned that we have to remark this, Your Honor, because you want every document to be marked as one letter. So if you will notice, the three documents, D-1 to D-13, these are voluminous documents. That's why we did not use the original marking of D-1, D-2, and D-3, and we marked it as quadruple T, a separate document, quadruple U, a separate document, and quadruple V, a separate document, Your Honors.
But these are essentially a different sets of documents.
No, Your Honors, these are just the same document, Your Honor. We just remark it, Your Honor, so that there will be no confusion, Your Honor, because if you will see, Your Honor, the Exhibit D, D-1, D-2, and D-3 are separate documents, Your Honor, and these are voluminous documents, Your Honor. And we understand, Your Honor, this representation understands that previously you want separate letters for every document, Your Honors. So that's why we adopted a separate marking, Your Honors.
I'm still not too clarified on that. Attorney Esguerra, could you please, do you have the documents there with you? Can you show me these documents so I will understand how the markings were changed? So we'll be able to follow the testimony of the witness. So originally. Counsel, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Richard, can you please start with your presentation?
Good morning, Honorable Commissioners. I'm pleased to be here.
Good morning.
On behalf of the petitioners before the National Inquiry on Climate Change to present the results of my work in a brief presentation and then take your questions afterwards. So I run a small nonprofit institute called Climate Accountability Institute that was founded in 2011 for the purpose of exploring the climate accountability of various actors, particularly large fossil fuel and cement companies. The conventional way, sorry, that was one too many. The conventional way of apportioning responsibility to various actors around the world is based on the UN Climate Convention in 1992 that stipulated that developed nations, in their common but differentiated responsibilities, must take the lead in dealing with the issue. And this focused attention on national emitters and emissions within the territory of the 197 countries in the world. And it was up to the leading developed wealthy countries to take the lead as Annex 1 countries to deal with the issue and help avoid the worst of climate change. That has been affirmed with various Climate of the Parties meetings, particularly in Paris in 2015 with the Paris Accord. And these are important steps forward. And just looking at this chart here, we can see the rise of global CO2 emissions worldwide in the black top line, followed by 5 of the largest countries in the world and their annual emissions since about 1900. And we can see in the red is the United States, and the yellow line is China, having now surpassed the United States as the largest current emitter of carbon dioxide. But if you look at the historical responsibility, which is one of the principles embodied in the UNFCCC document, the Framework Convention, historical emissions are the primary drivers of climate change, and so the history of a country's emissions really matter. And you can see here in the central bubble that the United States is the single top emitter since the Industrial Revolution in about 1750, with about 24% of the total global emissions of carbon dioxide from industrial sources. That made colleagues of mine and myself to start thinking about what if we shifted responsibility away from simply nations and consumers as emitters to the corporations and the supply chain of fossil fuels that drive national emissions around the world. So the basic principles involved is that we felt, and we would later prove, that the corporations have provided the lion's share of emissions and fossil fuels to global markets. They have been aware of the threat of climate change of their products since at least the 1960s, as Carol Muffett will testify later on. They have also misled consumers, investors, and legislators on the climate risk. And these corporations also have the technical skills, the capital, and in my view, the moral responsibility to help address the problem that they helped create through the proliferation of their products for decades. This work started in 2000. Let's wait for this. The initial work started in 2003 with a look at one individual oil company over its history from 1882 to 2002, published in my Methods and Results report on ExxonMobil with Friends of the Earth, who also then published a summary brief estimating the temperature response and sea level rise from this one company's emissions over time since 1882. Now here it's important to note that the change and the pivot and focus of this research was to not only count the direct operational emissions of one particular company over its history, but more importantly to include the emissions from the products that's extracted, refined, processed, transported, and sold to markets around the world. This, as we later find out, is about 90% of total emissions attributable to most companies. So once the early study on ExxonMobil was studied, was published, collaborators of mine and I decided that we would expand the project to include the largest corporations that have supplied fossil fuels and cement to global markets. And we established a threshold for inclusion in the list. We wanted a manageable list of less than 100 entities. We established a threshold of about 8 million metric tons of carbon emitted per year. And with that list, we found about 50 investor-owned companies, companies that you know by the names of Shell and Exxon and BP and Total in France, Statoil in Norway, Petrobras in Brazil, and on around the world, in China and Asia and in Africa, of course, and Europe and the United States. 36 of these companies were coal companies, 54 were oil and gas companies, and then we included 7 large cement companies because in the process of making cement, there's an industrial emission source of carbon dioxide from converting limestone into cement. It releases the carbon dioxide as an industrial process. We gathered data from sources around the world on these 90 carbon majors as they have become known. We wanted to use historical data from the producers themselves to the extent that that data was available. So we scoured libraries around the world to find annual reports. And bear in mind that investor-owned companies are required since the establishment of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Act of 1933 and 1944 to disclose to shareholders what its production has been, whether it be of vacuums or of tons of coal, since the 1930s. Many companies reported earlier than the 1930s, such as Standard Oil, but we wanted to use original documents and statements from the corporations themselves about how much oil in barrels, cubic feet of natural gas, and tons of coal they had produced during the preceding fiscal year. We enter production data in a sequence of Excel spreadsheets, noting particularly for oil, coal, and gas what the quality of the product was, particularly for coal, because the carbon content of coal varies dramatically from the rank, from low-level, low-energy content, lignite and brown coal to the high-quality bituminous coal. So we want to accurately track how much of the carbon in each kind of product would end up in the atmosphere. So it's important to consider the rank of coal, for example. It's also important to consider how much of petroleum in particular is diverted into non-energy uses, such as petrochemicals for plastics and lots of other uses, road oil for making asphalt and macadam, lubricants for lubricating machinery, waxes, those kinds of things that in net do not enter into the atmosphere. We want to focus on the amount of carbon in each unit of product that was combusted by its customers and ended up as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And I also want to state here that we used a precautionary and careful conservative methodology in choosing emissions factors by fuel. If we had a choice and a range of what those emission factors would be, we would tend to be fairly conservative in our selection of emissions factors. We would be conservative in estimating how much of each oil and gas company's own fuel was used in their refineries and pipelines, for example. The work was extensively peer-reviewed both before and during publication of the seminal paper in Climatic Change that you have a copy of. We mentioned earlier that there's a results and methodology report that was concurrently written that delved deeply into the methodology and the assumptions and the caveats and the sources of data, both corporate and global emissions factors data. That was reviewed by an expert team in the Netherlands as to the veracity of the methodology. We made some minor improvements as a follow-on, revised the methodology and results report, and thereupon endeavored to write the paper that ended up in Climatic Change, which also has a separate normal process of peer review for a professional journal, was sent to 3 or 4 anonymous peer reviewers who then provided a series of comments and suggestions on how to improve the study. And it was finally accepted and published in Climatic Change in January 2014. Here is a map of the headquarters of most of the carbon major entities. So we can see there's a broad distribution of where these corporations and state-owned companies are headquartered. So let's look at some of the data. I know you can't read the small print here. I just wanted to give you a sense of how the data was gathered on Excel spreadsheets. This one is for Peabody Energy in the United States. It has produced coal since before World War II. And I have data from 1945, I think, forward. And on the left side in the yellow columns, we note what kind of coal was mined year by year. And then in the green column, we combine in metric tons what the result was. And that is then transferred to another spreadsheet that summarizes for each of the coal companies what their annual production was. And through the analysis of and emissions factors, we convert that annual production by coal rank into emissions for each company for each year. And this is just a sample of one of those summary worksheets. Now, oil and gas companies having, in some cases, acquired and merged with lots of other companies across its history. We look at Chevron from 1912 to 2016. All liquids, crude oil and natural gas liquids, are on the left half. Natural gas is on the right half. For each of the companies that have eventually now become Chevron, including Texaco, Tenneco, Gulf, Getty Oil, and several other companies that has become what the company is now. And again, in the green column, we collect all the mergers and acquisitions for each of these companies in the green column in the center. So if we combine the estimated emissions, those that end up in the atmosphere, net of non-energy uses, compare that to the global rise in industrial sources of CO2 from fossil fuels and cement in the black line on top. And the red line is the total sum of all the 90 carbon majors over that same period of time. So we can see there's a fairly good correspondence between the rise of emissions attributed to carbon majors compared to the global total. And I'm focused only on industrial sources of carbon dioxide and methane, leaving aside other sources from deforestation, for example, or nitrous oxide emissions, or non-energy methane from landfills and rice paddies, for example, because I wanted to focus just on the industrial emissions. In this graph, we're just showing that the history of half a dozen companies has varied greatly over time. And this just shows ExxonMobil and Chevron in the mid-60s being larger companies than they are now. And Gazprom and Saudi Aramco as just 2 examples of the rise of state-owned oil and gas companies being now predominant. So if we look at some individual state-owned and investor-owned companies in this table, please refer to the text so you don't go blind looking at the chart. But these large oil and gas companies, the largest of which over time is Saudi Aramco, at 58 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent over its history, compared to total global industrial emissions of CO2 and methane of 1.7 trillion tons of CO2 equivalent. So Saudi Aramco is 3.4% of the global total. And Chevron, Texaco, for example, Chevron, by the way, is 3.18%, and then on down the line. And in the recent press release that I issued yesterday, I have updated this table to only look at 20 of the largest investor-owned companies alone, since I know that is the focus of the Commission's inquiry with respect to carbon majors. So please refer to that for an update of those numbers to 2016. So it matters a lot which periods of time we sum the largest carbon majors over their time. So in this chart here that goes from 1750, with the earliest date being 1854 for a coal company in the US, to 2016, Saudi Aramco leads the list. But if we look at just the last 1988 to 2015, Saudi Aramco again leads the top, but followed now by Gazprom as opposed to in the previous looking at Chevron. So the relative value of inputs from oil and gas and coal companies varied by the period of time that you're focused on. And this is important for our modeling that I'll describe next. But let me just point out first that half of all industrial emissions of CO2 have come since 1989 alone. So with colleagues at Union of Concerned Scientists and the University of Oxford, we ran the results of the carbon major, the major carbon producers' contribution to climate change and emissions, both from their products as well as from their direct operational emissions, and modeled their impact on increase of CO2 in the atmosphere and the radiative forcing that would result as a result of higher concentrations of CO2, as well as methane. And we looked at what that radiative change would result to in terms of increase in temperature, sea level surface temperature, as well as sea level rise itself. So in this first chart, we look at the CO2 rise attributable to the largest 20 or so companies. And on the left-hand side, in the next 3 slides, we look at the long period from 1880 to 2010 on the left. And from a shorter period of time where companies presumably were or should have been aware of the consequences of their products, from 1880 to 2010 on the right. And here we have the same chart, just focused on temperature rise attributable to the largest oil, gas, and coal companies, from a longer period from 1880 on the left and the shorter period from 1980 on the right. And we know that a lot of the climate damages, particularly ones that are the focus of litigation in the United States, focus on sea level rise. So we have again estimated what the contribution is of each of the largest companies to global rise of sea level. And in closing, I just want to suggest a very simplified view of where this work has started and aims to end up in terms of attributing potential liability to the largest oil, gas, and coal companies. But starting from their fossil fuel production, for which they have declared to shareholders what their annual production is, and converting that into carbon emissions by accounting for non-energy uses, again attributed to the production by each company, and then estimating the atmospheric CO2 increase, temperature response, and sea level rise, which then eventually will drive climate damages and climate costs. So in closing, I can't say it better than the editorial board of The Guardian at the onset of Hurricane Irma heading towards Miami and Key West in Florida, by quoting their editorial of September 10, 2017. Fossil fuel companies should be held accountable for the effects of climate change. Legal warfare has a twofold aim to overhaul transgressors' business models so that they, I'm sorry, I can't quite read my own text. Let me bring this up. Let me start again. Fossil fuel companies should be held accountable for the effects of climate change. Legal warfare has a twofold aim: to overhaul transgressors' business models so that they are in line with a global commitment to phase out fossil fuels and limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and to get them to pay for damages resulting from global warming. Climate litigation is the inevitable result of a failure of 2 decades of talks, but it is also an important way of reframing the climate crisis as a human rights emergency. Thank you so much.
Counsels?
Thank you, Richard, for that very enlightening presentation. I just have a few questions, Your Honors, if I may be allowed to ask.
Please go ahead.
Yes. In your statement, you mentioned, particularly page 5, in answering question number 7, you mentioned that Royal Dutch Shell estimated in a 1988 confidential report, which was published this year by Dutch journalists, that in 1984, its products contributed 3.9% of world's fossil fuel emissions. This estimate closely tracks the results of your own research. Now, in your experience in continuing research that you're currently undertaking, do you think Shell and the other carbon major companies are currently transparent about their operational and product-related emissions?
They are much more transparent, although perhaps incomplete, particularly with methane emissions attributable to their operations, on scope 1 direct operational emissions.
Okay.
They are much less uniform or transparent or complete in their estimates of emissions from their products. Their methodologies differ. Some companies don't report at all. Some companies more closely follow my methodology, and many companies follow the methodology of estimating emissions from their products sold on global markets, which often include crude oil and products that they have bought on the open market or with their partners. My work is focused only on the emissions likely from their carbon fuels extracted from the ground.
Okay.
And their net productive capacity for each year.
Okay, thank you for that, Richard. Based on your paper, one of the papers that you co-authored, the climate responsibilities of industrial carbon producer, that is exhibit quadruple X to quadruple X-14. Could you explain why it is important to consider the responsibilities of fossil fuel companies in addition to the responsibilities of nation states?
We have focused on corporations because they have unique power in the marketplace. And management and engineers decide on capital investment for acquiring or finding and developing new reserves. Management decides overall strategy about how much money to invest and where to invest their money, and whether to invest in fossil fuels, whether to shift more to natural gas, whether to invest in renewable or lower carbon fuels. And so it's as much up to the corporations and senior management about where and how and the scale of global emissions are made in the corporate management suite than it is up to the nations that seeks to control emissions.
Thank you, Richard. Last question. In this evaluation, did you find that there was a period of time when companies could have acted based on the scientific knowledge to reduce the risk of climate change on people, such as Filipinos?
Well, I started researching and reading the climate literature in the early 70s when I was in undergraduate school. It became the focus of my work in graduate school in the 80s. But I could discern from the literature then being published on climate change that it was going to be a very difficult and large scale and one of the most significant issues facing humanity overall. And that was from my undergraduate days. So if the oil and gas companies had read the same literature, they would have been forewarned. As Mr. Muffet will present later on this afternoon, in fact, many of them had intimate knowledge about climate science. And so there certainly was a time if not in the 60s or perhaps even the 70s, if we excuse their long delay in acting. But by 80s, the preponderance of the evidence was pretty clear that there was a problem with their products, and that their products would change the atmosphere and temperature would rise and result in very difficult issues for the humanity as a whole, not only in the Philippines, but elsewhere in the world.
Thank you, Richard. That will be all for us, Your Honors, unless you do have questions.
Thank you very much, Counsel and Mr. Witness. Commissioner Armamento.
Commissioner?
Good morning, Richard. I want to know, how did you come up with the conclusion attributing specific accountability to a particular so-called carbon majors? How were you able to come up with that conclusion?
We estimated how much carbon in each product that they delivered to markets and had extracted from the ground. We estimated their emissions over their corporate history and compared those emissions. Take Chevron, for example, which over its more than 100-year history has contributed 54 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Compare that to global industrial emissions from all fossil fuel and cement sources. That is a little bit over 3% of the total of 1.7 trillion tons of carbon dioxide.
Thank you. May I ask another question? Are there other factors that may be considered, other than the fossil fuel, the cement, which may be considered as also contributory to the worsening climate change?
As I mentioned, there are other sources of anthropogenic or human sources of greenhouse gases. There are landfills, for example, for methane. There are other sources of methane from landfills and cattle. There's nitrous oxide from fossil fuels, mostly being burned in engines. There are chlorofluorocarbons and the replacement refrigerants that are also causing climate change. But in terms of modeling, we wanted to just focus on the industrial sources itself, because in part because there were no companies large enough in having cattle or in deforesting lands, for example, that would account for 8 million metric tons or its equivalent per year. So we're just focused on the fossil fuel and cement companies.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pimentel, your questions.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. On the chart that you presented, I think it was number 13, when you were talking about the results, top 6 carbon majors, carbon dioxide and methane emissions in 1910 to 2013. The chart where you showed the emissions of Chevron, Saudi Aramco, ExxonMobil. Yeah. Anyway, I was wondering because the chart of Chevron showed that in the 1970s there was high emission, but it relatively went down as the years went on. And even that of ExxonMobil and BP UK. So you think that since there was a significant drop in their emissions, was it a recognition of a responsibility on their part? Has it something to do with climate change that they at that particular point recognized that they were affecting the environment?
No, it was the rise of state-owned companies, particularly through OPEC, and taking possession of the oil reserves in Saudi Arabia, for example, on behalf of Saudi Aramco, and pushing out the production, net production of the international oil companies that had previously produced almost oil in Saudi Arabia. And similarly for other state-owned companies that were established in the 1970s. That's what basically drove down the annual production rates of the international oil companies.
So what you were saying is that the results of the Chevron drop and all was because of the source. in terms of production because
Exactly.
state took over the oil exploration, whatever, development.
Exactly.
Oh.
So now most of the oil in Saudi Arabia is on behalf of the national oil company, the Saudi Aramco oil company.
So it had nothing to do with
Nothing to do with recognition that their
of-
products were causing climate damages. No.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Karen Dumpit.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a follow-up on Commissioner Gwen's question. So if we're going to track the production,
Sorry, say again?
if we're going to track the production of oil and exploration, it hasn't really been going down. Just as a follow-up, it just means that the production shifted from private companies to state-run institutions.
As you can see on this chart here, global emissions are still, well, they're plateauing now, but they have not yet peaked demonstrably. They may go up next year. We'll have to wait for the next year's data. But oil, gas, and coal emissions are all still rising. Although coal emissions may be on their way down now that there's global recognition that that is the worst fossil fuel to burn.
Additional question. In the studies that you conducted, let me just find the reference. You did the peer review process, and from what I gather here is that you said that there were no published industry challenges on the results of your studies. Did you actually reach out to the carbon majors regarding your study, and did you actively seek their comments to it?
I did not. I've heard from third sources that many people in the companies have and are aware of the study, but they prefer to keep their comments to themselves and have not publicly challenged them.
So,
and I might add that I'm basing the emissions on corporate data supplied to their shareholders and using a robust peer-reviewed methodology to estimate how much of that production ends up in the atmosphere. Now, there may be variables between companies and the accuracy of corporate data that they've always been welcome to improve if they wish. But that result is basically unassailable in terms of how much they have contributed to atmospheric CO2 concentration.
And then just my last point, I'm just curious. If you count the bloviating bloggers, can you give me examples of the bloggers that just, comment on your studies, and perhaps we can take a look at them if you have a list?
I don't have a list in my head, except I remember Shigarat, a fellow by the name of Bishop. I can provide you with a list this afternoon if you like. But these were basically bloggers who had come across a publication following a conference at La Jolla, California in 2012, where colleagues of mine, including the Union of Concerned Scientists and many legal experts from the tobacco industry and tobacco litigators, as well as climate scientists and climate lawyers. There was a small conference that was held in La Jolla to look at the potential legal liability and the legal avenues by which major fossil fuel companies might be held liable down the road. And they were concerned that that document, although it was made public as soon as the conference was over, basically established a conspiracy against the oil companies, which was not at all true, but that's what they were stating in their blogs. And they had found the holy grail of why the Attorney General of New York, for example, and the Attorney General of Massachusetts were investigating ExxonMobil for potential fraud. They had traced it back to some of the discussions we had at La Jolla on potential liability.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heede.
Father Pedro. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for, I feel you've clarified for us a number of points that are very helpful. Um, um, in what you have said, a number of points come together. So you're explaining the shift in relation to OPEC occurring around the 1980s, well, between the 70s and 80s. Maybe the specific question is why is 1980 the chosen date for either charging from the beginning or allocating from the attributing from the beginning to the present time, or from 1980 to the present time? Why 1980?
That's an important question, and that might be debated by scientists for many years yet, but we had to choose a date by which we could start the clock, as it were, on accountability for climate change, because there were several scientific publications from the National Academy of Sciences, for example, that had made it public a concern about the impact of fossil fuels. So at that point, there was no excuse for the oil, gas, and coal companies to be aware. They certainly were aware many years earlier, but in terms of established science being published by national academies, that was a pivotal point in the late 70s.
Was there a particular paper or conference that really made that known?
Yes, and I don't recall the citation. I'm happy to give it to you afterwards so you can take a look at that. I believe it was 1977 or 78 by the National Academy of Sciences. And there were other papers published around the same time. I think the paper I'm trying to think of is the Cheney report in the late 70s.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
May I just add one final note? I forgot to mention that all the carbon majors that I showed in the chart with the black and the red line, the total emissions from industrial sources over that period of time was 1.7 trillion tons of CO2 and equivalent with methane. And the carbon majors account for 66% of all those emissions over time. 1.1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent.
How much percentage in terms of the others?
There are many other companies that do not make my threshold, smaller oil and gas companies, coal companies that have gone out of business, their assets have dispersed. So we've accounted for 2/3 of it, and the rest is, well, I might pick up on smaller companies over the next couple of years to see which companies have now risen to meet the threshold. Some Australian and German companies, for example, might now meet the threshold. So I might be higher than 2/3 in the years to come.
I will now be asking questions. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Heede, for coming
Thank you,
here
Ms. Cadiz.
before our commission to testify on the subject that you have just spoken on. You are now the Executive Director of the Climate Accountability Institute. May I know, when was this institute founded?
In September 2011, with my colleague Naomi Reskis.
And how big is this institute? How many members do you have?
Your Honor, it's a very small institute. It is basically, I'm the only staff person. I have a very respected board, but I've decided to keep my research close to the vest, as it were, and conduct all of the research except for the occasion when I need a research assistant. But we have not expanded beyond my sole contribution and that of my colleagues on and off the board.
So this was largely a solo project on your part, with assistance here and then.
Crucial assistance, I might add, from Naomi Reskis' important work and Merchants of Doubt and follow-on work on holding corporations accountable, not only for climate change, but also for asbestos and DDT and tobacco, etc.
So the period covered by your studies from 18, again, could you, from the
1854 is the oldest
1854.
record for Westmoreland coal based in
So
United States.
your first data was 1850s
Yeah.
up to 19.
I've just updated it to 2016, and I'll be updating it every year going forward.
But all right, okay. And how long did it take you to finish this study?
Many years. I had to read thousands of annual reports, many of which are fairly inaccessible. You have to go to uncatalogued collections in dusty basements all around the world. I had colleagues who would gather annual reports for me. And I started this work with, as we mentioned, Standard Oil with ExxonMobil in 2003, expanded the project in 2005, and I spent 9 years or so collecting and analyzing data. But I wanted to rely to the extent possible on corporate published reports in their 10K reports to the SEC or to annual reports to shareholders, or lacking that data, corporate histories. The largest oil and gas companies have published histories of their activities and their locations, and oftentimes I would find production data in those corporate histories.
So when did you start the study? What year?
Subsequent to the Standard Oil through ExxonMobil study, we picked it up again in about 2006, I believe. I worked part-time until 2010. We established Climate Accountability Institute in 2011, which then slowly attracted foundation funding to complete the work, as well as funding from Greenpeace International to help us get across the finish line of both peer review and finishing the study. I worked mostly on my own still, but thankfully I had lots of colleagues who could review the methodology and the results with me.
So your study consisted of a total of how many years? Because you earlier mentioned there was a gap where you stopped
I could say 1,000 hours a year for 12 years.
All right, 12 years, 1,000 hours a year. All right, thank you. Prior to this research project, did you engage in any other scientific research?
I engaged and worked at a place called Rocky Mountain Institute that was focused on understanding how we can save energy and water and other resources cheaper than getting new supplies, led by Amy and Hunter Lovins. So that was another nonprofit research institute with 3 staff when I joined and probably 100 staff now. But I left in 2002 to do work on inventorying corporate and municipal inventories for my private clients through a consultancy. And that's how I met the originators of the climate justice program, who commissioned me to start with the Standard Oil through ExxonMobil study.
So you were commissioned by the Climate Justice Program, and
That's
were
correct.
there other organizations who funded your research?
Early on for that study, Friends of the Earth UK, I think helped fund some of the study. There was a Norwegian foundation called Minor Foundation for Major Challenges that put up most of the money. So it's mostly foundation driven, but other environmental organizations were also interested in the results.
Was Greenpeace involved in funding this project?
In those days, no. That came later on in 2012 and 13 when I had approached Greenpeace to see if they were interested in helping to conclude the study. And it ended up at their legal department. They realized that there was some traction to be had and helped me fund and identify expert reviewers of the methodology.
So the Climate Accountability You did this research under the umbrella of the Climate Accountability Institute.
I finished it under the umbrella of
You
the Climate
finished it, and
Accountability Institute.
there were funds provided to you by Greenpeace before this project was concluded.
Very, very modest funds. My funding these days is from private foundations in the United States.
And you earlier stated that it was you who approached Greenpeace for funding.
Well, they had become aware of the work through other channels, and I forget if I approached them first or they sent me an email first, but nonetheless, they seemed to be interested in exploring the possibility of completing the work because I didn't have enough foundation funding to put in enough time near the end of my consulting days to finish the work. So it needed some funding from Greenpeace and from Climate Justice.
And after this research project of yours was completed, it was published in 2004,
2014, with an online edition published 3 months earlier.
All right. And so you are referring to this document. Counsels, please correct me if I'm mistaken. Marked as Exhibit Quadruple U. This is the document that we are talking about. Can you show it to the witness?
Correct.
Consisting of 104 pages. And this, basically this research project of yours is the mother document from which are based the other exhibits, the press releases, the PowerPoint presentation, etc. Most of these other okay.
What's that? Oh. As I said, there's a lot of follow-on work, but yes, this is the explication in great detail about the methodology, the sources of the data. I had unlimited pages to describe where I get the data, where the emissions factors come from, what the range of estimates are, for example, for methane release from coal mining. And I would canvass international sources from the UN, International Energy Agency, and other recognized sources. And that's all explained about how I derive emissions factors, how I estimate how much natural gas, oil and gas companies use on their own account to run refineries and pipelines, and sources of data on actual production by company, and by coal rank, for example, and for cement.
Excuse me, Mr. Witness. I just noted you earlier mentioned that prior to the publication, was it prior or after the publication, when this work was subjected to anonymous peer reviewers review process?
I started writing the methods and results report prior to drafting the scientific paper in climate change that was subject to anonymous review by experts in the field.
How do you know these people who reviewed your work were experts if they were anonymous?
It's not up to me to choose expert reviewers. It's up to the editor of the journal. Climatic change is a highly valuable, preeminent publication in climatic change, founded in the 80s, I think, by Stephen Schneider. and is a well-recognized source of quality information. And their normal process would be to find reviewers in the field who had the expertise to review the methodology used in the paper itself.
But I have to understand why reviewers would choose to be anonymous or would be held to be anonymous.
Oh, it's the normal peer review process in a professional journal that reviewers aren't voluntarily anonymous. It's by rule that the authors should not know who the reviewers are. So there are no back channel communications. It's done anonymously. I take their advice as experts. I make the changes that, if I agree with them, I suggest and then resubmit after my revision to the editor of the journal, who then decides if I've made sufficient changes based on expert review comments to warrant publication.
So the review process by anonymous reviewers happened before they were published or after they were published?
Oh no, that was done as the process of submitting the paper, having it reviewed, and then accepted by the journal. So that's a many-month process usually of having anonymous reviews. And this is normal in the scientific literature to not know who the reviewers are, but you have faith in the expertise of the editor that they find reviewers that have the expertise, so that you're assured that the quality of the information that then publish is relatively unassailable.
So the review process happened as you were finishing the research project.
The data was in. I was drafting the scientific paper. This report was, I think, published late summer of 2013, maybe early fall. So that was put to bed earlier on. During the review process at Climatic Change for the scientific paper. So this report came first, and then I drafted the scientific paper concurrently, but then the peer review process took several months after that, and then was accepted in August or so of 2013 and published online in September of 2013.
So you finished the first draft of your work, your research. It was given to anonymous reviewers. You considered their inputs, their opinions, and then you revised your research, after which it was published.
It's worth mentioning that that the expert reviewers made comments on the flow of the text. They would suggest you need to explain the methodology in some better detail. They might challenge a few words here and there, but there was not a wholesale revision of the methodology or the results themselves.
All right. So the peer review was more in regard to technical editing as to the language, etc., so that perhaps it might be more understandable to the readers of the scientific journal?
No, I would say it's more than that. They would also have comments on assessing uncertainty, for example, about the estimates, so that I could explain that in more detail in the scientific paper. What are the sources of uncertainty and how have I dealt to minimize them? So it was more than a technical language edit. These are experts in the field of estimating emissions from energy sources, for example. And I don't know who these reviewers are, so I can't reflect on what their expertise is or verify that. That's how it normally goes, and I'm an expert reviewer myself for several journals based on my own expertise.
So you're saying that this research project of yours, even after it was published, the anonymous reviewers have not been made known to you until this date?
I'm sorry, they have not what?
Been made to you. The anonymous.
Oh, no, I don't
reviewers.
know who they are.
Up to now, you don't know.
But it's worth saying that nobody has come to me either as an industry source or an academic expert to say there are problems with your paper. They haven't approached me privately. They haven't published any challenges or uh, or critiques of the paper itself.
How are their opinions, their findings, their recommendations relayed to you? Who relayed this feedback from the peer reviewers to you?
That's handled by the journal's editor in charge of this particular publication. When a scientific paper comes in for review and is preliminarily accepted by an editor, the senior editor would choose a junior editor to run the process. And I would know the name of that editor at Climatic Change, but I wouldn't know who he might have contacted to review the paper.
And are these editors who are relaying to you the feedback from the anonymous peer reviewers scientists, or are they ordinary
In my
editors?
case, yes.
They were scientists.
Yes. Working at, in my case, I was a university researcher in a university in Canada.
And you're saying that this process of subjecting a scientific work to anonymous reviewers is standard practice in
Very standard practice in order to protect the integrity of the work and integrity of the process.
Does not change the integrity of the research.
And you're saying that up to now there have been no reputable group or science group that has assailed your findings?
That's correct. And in several of my publications, I have said that if industry wishes to improve my data set or my methodology, that they should come forward and submit new data to replace my data set or to improve it. And to date, no one has come forward to do so.
You were discussing earlier the ratio between the emissions of the carbon majors to what you termed as the global industrial emissions. How are you able to determine the total global industrial emissions?
Fortunately, there has been extensive work done at several labs, but one in particular at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee in the United States, that has created a database of fossil fuel production and their emissions around the world from, as I do, oil, coal, natural gas, flaring, and cement. And the record for coal production and emissions runs back to 1751, mostly in the UK and elsewhere and later on in Europe, followed by crude oil production starting in the 1860s, I believe, and natural gas several years later, and cement in the early 19th century. So they have themselves, on a global basis, looked at how much how much resource was extracted, and much like my methodology, estimated how much of that carbon has ended up in the atmosphere on an annual basis. So I've taken that whole data string of fossil fuel emissions since 1751, added it up to 2016, and as I said, it's above 1.7 trillion tons in aggregate, most of which since 1989, half of which since 1989.
You stated, you were talking earlier about anthropogenic causes to climate change. Uh, and impliedly, there are also natural causes to climate change. Uh, if you were to put a ratio between the two causes, anthropogenic and natural, what ratio would you, the anthropogenic versus the natural cause? Out of 100%, how much would be anthropogenic?
I believe that the current research would put it above 80%, perhaps even above 90%. If you account for volcanic activity, solar variability, and other non-human causes.
80
That's
to,
not my expertise, but that's
Yeah.
what I remember reading.
So you're estimating that 80 to 90% of the cause of climate change is anthropogenic or natural?
Anthropogenic.
Anthropogenic.
Yes,
Natural cause is just between 10 to 20%.
that's correct.
Is that um
I'm happy to provide citations in the scientific literature about what that is. Hopefully, I'm not off that range, but that's what I recall reading. And I'm happy to provide documentation of that.
how are you able to determine that? I mean, that estimate,
How were the scientists able to determine that?
the 10 to 20% of climate change is only 10 to 20% of climate change is due
Well,
to natural causes.
they would model recent volcanic activity. They would understand the atmospheric physics involved about how much cooling has been contributed by volcanic activity versus previous periods. They know the strength of the anthropogenic emissions and understand that physics quite well. They understand that solar variability has an impact, but it's been deemed to be relatively minor in the overall scheme of climate change, at least currently. And these people understand atmospheric physics a lot better than I do, and have determined that the largest proportion by far is the human input of fossil fuels and other sources, such as deforestation.
I was just curious because last night I was reading through other materials and I sense a hesitancy on the part of some reputable scientists to go into the field of attribution. Where do their hesitance come from? That they stop short of attributing climate change to anthropogenic or natural causes. They just refuse to delve into that area of climate science.
I assume you don't mean industry scientists on behalf of oil and gas and coal companies. They would have a natural reason to avoid making those calculations.
So are you?
But scientific free scientists are able to express their expertise, and they have determined, based on their knowledge, that the major impact is from fossil fuels. And there are a lot of skeptics that would deny that science, a few anyway. But by and large, those skeptics, when they are able to publish a scientific paper, are often refuted.
Are you saying that there is a general consensus among climate scientists and I don't know what field of
That's
science?
exactly what I'm saying, is that the preponderance, the vast preponderance of academic and professional experts in climate science agree that climate change is human caused.
Is anthropogenic, other than the scientists under the employ of, let's say, the carbon majors.
I don't want to characterize industry scientists as dishonest, but there have been cases where industry has funded other research groups in order to highlight the contribution, falsely in my mind, about the impact of solar variability, for example, and it's all up to the sun. It's not anthropogenic. I think that's false.
You don't have to answer this. I was just curious. What is the opinion of or the position of Dr. James Hansen? I'm sure you're familiar with him.
I am familiar with him.
Regarding the science of or the issue of attribution of causes to climate change.
He has been convinced since before his testimony before the U.S. Senate in June of 1988 that we were then detecting a human fingerprint on climate. And he's been proven right.
And that he's also saying that the major cause of climate
Absolutely.
change is anthropogenic.
Like 99%, I think, of world's climate scientists agree with that statement.
All right. I have no further questions. Maybe the other commissioners would like to follow up on. Thank you very much, Mr. Heede, for taking your time out to
Thank you, Mr.
testify
Cadiz.
before this commission.
Thank you,
Counsel?
Commissioners.
Your Honor, may the witness be excused?
Yes, of course. Attorney Fernandez, what happens now? Do we break out to lunch?
Yes, Your Honor. And also, we are requesting everybody to sign the registration sheet in front of the session hall.
So we take a 1 hour break for lunch and then we come back at 1:30 to
Yes,
resume.
sir. We come back at 1:30.
All right, the session is suspended. Thank you very much. We return at 1:30.